All right, now we're on part 2. These are the potential consequences of the carnivore diet. Too much iron, we covered this a little bit, but iron really is hard to eliminate. The body has a really hard time getting rid of excess iron. And because meat's such a high source, especially red meat, and a lot of the people going on this carnivore diet, they're picking red meat as their optimal meat of choice. I guess in Michaela Peterson's situation, she had the least amount of symptoms with red meat. But the consequences of red meat is going to be it's very high in heme iron. And that can cause liver problems, it can cause heart, increase your chances of getting heart attacks and heart problems because it's a pro-oxidant. It's aging your body. It's kind of resting your body.
Well, you've another thing that you've done I think is very relevant is your work on iron.
Mm-hmm.
So you had looked at how excess dietary iron affects, again, I think protein homeostasis.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, this was inspired by my wife Julie Anderson's work on Parkinson's disease, where many years ago she published a series of papers showing how important iron was, causing damage to complex 1 in the mitochondria through redox reactions, and then that very specific damage would play out to all the way to neuronal death, the dopaminergic neurons. So we went back and looked at iron. Basically, we had a collaborator, David Kalilia, who was able to show that iron levels become elevated during normal aging in the worm. We thought, well, that's interesting because that's what happens in human brains and other tissues. And so we did a couple of things. First of all, we fed exogenous iron, so we increased the iron levels in the media, in the diet. That accelerated aging, so it shortened our lifespan, but it also accelerated the accumulation of insoluble proteins. So it accelerated this sort of molecular pathology of aging. And the other thing we did was to feed the worms an chelator, an iron chelator. And in that case, the iron levels did not rise during aging, and the worms lived longer, and it protected against protein aggregation as well.
That was going to be my next question. Absolutely, I think it's a very important question. You know, people are supplementing with all sorts of vitamins and minerals, and some people are taking way too many. You know,
exactly.
You know, iron is something that I think people should get their iron levels measured. They shouldn't just be blindly taking an iron supplement. I mean, because that could be completely dangerous.
Absolutely.
Now there are ways to block iron. Unfortunately, a lot of the ways to block iron are actually from plant sources. So like you could take turmeric, blocks and binds iron. It actually sucks iron out of the body. Olive leaf, but these are cayenne pepper, but these are plant sources, and these people apparently can't do plant things. There's milk. Milk also binds to iron and can remove excess iron out of the body. So if you're one of these people that can at least do dairy products, in my opinion, that's much better than strict carnivore. If you can do carnivore plus dairy, plus some, cheese, some milk, and, whenever you eat a piece of meat, whenever you eat a steak or something, eat some milk with it, that'll block a lot of the iron. But unfortunately, a lot of these people are so sensitive, they can't even do dairy. They can't do casein. Okay, so that's an issue. Too much lean protein. So meat you can run the risk of getting too much protein, and that's very hard for the kidneys, especially if the protein is lean. So if you're not getting very fatty cuts of meat, you're getting more lean cuts of meat, this could be way too much protein for the body. When you eat protein, you want a lot of fat with it, and that kind of buffers the protein and makes it easier for the kidneys to process that protein. So if you are eating meat, try to eat, hopefully you can eat like butter. That would be great. That would be much better than pure meat, because if you could just eat some butter with that meat, if you could eat some ghee, so ghee is a source of dairy that doesn't even have casein. It's clarified butter, so they remove all the casein from it. If you could eat butter or ghee whenever you eat meat, I think that'd be much healthier. That way you're eating less protein and more fat, and that's going to be beneficial for your longevity.
And I was thinking the study from, I think it was Dr. Fontana's lab that showed that humans that undergo caloric restriction naturally gravitate towards eating more protein because it's more satiating. And so people that were eating a higher animal protein diet, even though they were caloric restricted, so they were eating about 30% less normal food than they normally would, their IGF-1 levels were higher because
were normal, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't go lower like they do in animal studies.
Right. Until they restricted the proteins.
Until they restricted the protein.
So they actually did the second study. Fontana and colleagues did the second studies, the follow-up in which they restricted the proteins and then the IGF-1.
I haven't seen that one. Okay. Yeah, I should definitely take a look at that. But for people that are listening and kind of wondering, we're talking about one of the major dietary regulators of the IGF-1 pathway, which maybe you can mention a little bit about the role of IGF-1 in the aging process.
Yeah, so proteins, and particularly certain amino acids, methionine, cysteine, etc., they regulate IGF-1 levels, and IGF-1 seems to be one of the axes that regulates or accelerates aging in multiple cell types.
Let's talk about some of the deficiencies that people can run into on this diet. People might think, oh, well, vitamin C. That comes to mind, right? Because they think, well, meat doesn't have vitamin C. I don't think that it's that much of an issue. People are doing this carnivore diet for a long period of time, and they don't seem to be getting scurvy. And that could be because you actually don't need as much vitamin C when you're only eating meat. When you're on more of a ketogenic diet, when you're not eating a lot of carbs, you actually don't need as much vitamin C. Your requirement for vitamin C goes down.
But I'm going to just touch on vitamin C. It's the most contentious because it's one of the rare things that is more abundant in plants than in meat. It turns out that when you're not eating a lot of carbohydrate, your need for vitamin C goes down. But it's been known for a couple centuries that fresh meat by itself will cure scurvy. The amount of vitamin C that you need for scurvy, to prevent scurvy, is about 10 milligrams.
And there actually is some vitamin C in meat, especially if it's fresh. So if people are eating some fresh meat, they're probably not going to get scurvy, although that's not to say that they're getting the ideal amount of vitamin C. So it could be that though they don't get scurvy, it's still not optimal levels of vitamin C. So you could be it's not maybe ideal. Another deficiency, people might say, well, they might say, antioxidants. What about all the antioxidants? Because meat's not very high in antioxidants. I would say this isn't really much of a legitimate argument against the carnivore diet, because it turns out that the antioxidants that our own body creates are actually more powerful than plant antioxidants. Plant antioxidants really can't even compete with our own body's source of antioxidants, such as glutathione. And they're eating this meat, and this meat is actually helping them create more glutathione because it's so high in these amino acids, and your body takes all these amino acids and it creates glutathione. And really, these plant antioxidants can't even compete with glutathione. Glutathione is just so much more powerful because it's what our own bodies were built to run on, because it's what our own bodies create as a source of antioxidants. And these plant antioxidants, a lot of times they don't even get absorbed that well into the blood. And if they do make it into the blood, they're not into the bloodstream for very long. So they might be in the bloodstream for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, but then they kind of dissipate and they leave. But what your own body creates, it's like your body creates it in the ideal amount, just what we need, just when your body needs it. And so this is another reason I promote NAC, because the NAC is an amino acid that makes your body hyperproduce this glutathione, which is just so powerful. So antioxidants, not really a good argument against the diet. Fiber. There's an argument. Personally, I think that the biggest deficiency on this diet would be fiber, because fiber, I think is so important for feeding the bacteria. And I think if you're only eating meat, if you're not eating any sources of like resistant starch, then I think your bacteria in your colon could starve. And these bacteria in your colon are producing so much beneficial vitamins and everything. And yeah, it's really kind of a starvation diet for your bacteria. That really could lead to problems, I think, in the long term. And it was Dr. Rhonda Patrick, I think. She said that when you deprive your bacteria of fibers and such, that the bacteria can actually start to eat the lining of your colon, the mucus, the layer that protects your colon. Because the bacteria, if they don't have any of these resistant starches and beneficial fibers, they can actually be like, where's my food? And they actually start eating the lining of your colon, which could kind of compound the problems that these people have, because then when they actually do start to introduce fibers and stuff again, and it actually makes the problems worse, because now their colon lining might be eaten away by all these bacteria. And so they have a weakened colon lining, and then every plant material is even more toxic to them. The undigested proteins, they just get right into the bloodstream, because now their intestinal lining is even more weak, because they've been depriving their bacteria, and the bacteria have in turn eaten the lining of their intestine. You see what I'm saying here? So that could be an issue.
I know that. So that your gut bacteria, what they eat is fiber, and they're mostly in your colon. And so when you eat a fiber deficient diet, proteins, lipids, sugars are all absorbed in the upper intestine, but your bacteria in your gut starve. And in order to stop themselves from starving, they start to cannibalize the gut barrier that they live on, because it's got carbohydrates. And so a low fiber diet can cause massive gut, barrier breakdown. It's actually the most, in terms of magnitude, the most potent thing that regulates gut health is fiber.
So is that like irritable bowel syndrome, things along those lines?
Well, that can happen, but you don't have to have irritable bowel syndrome to have your gut barrier breaking down. You can have a low level of inflammation, not know it.
It's kind of really important to feed that stuff. It's like a garden. We got to feed our garden, and I think that's where the fiber really is important. Now, some of these people, they might run into constipation as well, because fiber can help move the bowels. And if you're only eating meat, although a lot of the people say they don't have constipation. So, I can't really say for sure that that's going to be a problem on the diet, but it's something to consider. I'm sure some people might have constipation. You could argue that there's a deficiency of plant hormetic compounds, which I talked about earlier. Now, Dr. Rhonda talks about this a lot. The plant hormetic compounds, yes, they stress the body. So yeah, we understand these plants filled with toxins. Okay, these are plant toxins. But the toxins can have beneficial effects. And Dr. Rhonda talks about a few of these, but she talks about turmeric. Turmeric it's a plant toxin, but it causes neurogenesis. Same with broccoli sprouts, sulforaphane. So it's a total toxin, but if you're healthy enough, and if you have a healthy gut, and you can process this plant toxin, then it can actually benefit you. So, rather than give up all these plant toxins, maybe we should heal the gut so we can actually process these plant toxins and use them to our benefit. And then we have the risk of contamination with parasites. All this meat. So that's just a lot of risk. Let's say you undercook your meat. You can get a parasite. And some people, they're getting into raw meat, because they don't like the toxins in cooked meat, and they don't think the cooked meat's good, so they're getting into the raw meat. Well, that's really, you're opening yourself up to parasites. That's not smart. And then there's potential problems with the cooked meat. So if you're eating a bunch of cooked meat, there's cancer-causing compounds in the meat, depending on how you cook it. There's more or less. If you roast your meat, if you're browning your meat, if you're frying your meat, there's a lot of heterocyclic amines that are created, and other cancer-causing chemicals that are just produced from that reaction of cooking the proteins in the meat. So it's like whether you eat it raw or whether you eat it cooked, if all you're eating is meat, you're really going to get a lot of these issues. So you're going to really open yourself up to the parasites and the cancer-causing chemicals in the cooked meat. Now, you could lessen the cancer-causing chemicals if you were to boil the meat. So if someone were to do the diet and if they were to eat all this meat, maybe you should boil the meat. I think that's probably the best way to cook your meat. But most of these people, they're probably roasting their meat or frying it. Not good. Not good. All right, so now let's talk about some of the alternatives in part 3. If you're going to do the diet, how can you do it in a more healthy way? And do you need to do this diet at all? Can you actually, if you're one of these people with an autoimmune condition, are there other ways to avoid these symptoms or heal the gut where you don't have to be doing this extreme carnivore diet and you're still gonna heal yourself and not have these symptoms, these horrible symptoms? Because I'm totally sympathetic to these people. These people have this, problem, and they're grasping for anything, and so they're like, the carnivore diet. That's all they can. They're gonna do what works. Okay, so let's come up with something else. Let's come up with another solution in the long term, where we're gonna have actually longevity. Okay, real longevity, because this might eliminate your symptoms, but is it going to be a longevity promoting diet? I don't think so. I don't think so.